Hey fellas, Lagoon here, and this is a video game console, a specially designed piece of hardware made for playing said console's library of games. That'll cost one kitty, please. Game consoles can be expensive, especially if you buy them around launch. Consoles, despite being sold at a loss, cost so much money that a lot of people can't justify spending. This is totally valid. People like to wait for a deal. What is a worthwhile purchase for me may be a ripoff to you, and that is perfectly fine. Consoles are for entertainment. If you have to choose between a PS3 or food for your kids, the choice is pretty obvious for most people. I love game consoles, hence why I do this, but companies can't rely on people like me who make horrible decisions. They want their consoles to thrive, and a crucial part of that can be lowering the price of the console itself. Price drops happen a ton in this industry, but can be tough to pull off. The same console that sold for $200 becoming $150? Probably hard to convince the bigwigs at these companies to do such a thing. That's where budget redesigns come in. These are different from normal redesigned consoles in my opinion. While a lot of them are for budgetary reasons, some are meant to upgrade the console in some way. Their goal is to entice me with better specs or a nicer screen so that I do this. The consoles I am talking about today were made for the sole reason of lowering the cost of entry into these consoles' ecosystems. While I can't go over every example of this in history, I'd like to talk about a few that really stand out to me, such as the PS3 Slim and Super Slim. These stand out to me as some of the most important budget redesigns in history. The PS3 was set to be one of the greatest consoles of all time. There was going to be so much packed into this thing. It could play PS1 and 2 games, Blu-ray discs, can be combined with other PS3s to make a government supercomputer. It could do everything. But this came at a price, one of $499 USD or $599 for the bigger hard drive. Jesus Christ, this thing was expensive. Due to the gargantuan price tag and the lack of games, the PS3 did not sell as well as Sony was expecting, especially after the meteoric success of the PS2. To salvage the PS3, Sony needed to decrease the price and fast. Enter the PS3 Slim, a redesigned version of the PS3 that costed $299. To achieve this price, they cut features like the ability to play PS2 games and some other random things like the infrared port and stuff like that. In addition to this, they later put out the PS3 Super Slim, which is the one I have here. The price was around $270 USD and features an even smaller design with a little flippy flappy on the top. Look at it, it's a little flippy flappy, it's so cute. While it sucks to lose PS2 backwards compatibility, it is more than worth it. Hell, with the money you could save by buying the Slim, you could probably buy a used PS2. This was an absolutely necessary move by Sony. Without this, the PS3 probably would have been a massive failure. Speaking of failures, the 3DS! The 3DS launch was not great. The original console actually did get a price cut, which no doubt helped the 3DS become the success that it was, but that's not what I want to talk about today. The 3DS's main gimmick was, of course, the 3D. Fucking duh, it's in the name. 3D was cool, but it could be rough on the eyes of young children. It honestly gave me headaches as a kid. I saw Frozen in 3D a long time ago and it genuinely made me feel sick. For a company that appeals to kids as hard as Nintendo does, this was a little concerning. That's why they made this little slab, the 2DS, the 3DS, but without the 3D, and with a drastically different form factor, as you could definitely tell. This got a lot of criticism back in the day, and is still questioned now. Some say that this is an extremely gimped 3DS, just because it is missing the 3D, but like, guys, the 3D was cool, yes, but far from necessary. As I said, 3D was harmful to some people's eyes. Yes, you could just turn the 3D off, but why not just forego the feature altogether and save $40? Hell, some later models only costed $100. That is a steal. You could get the console, usually bundled with Mario Kart 7, and play all the original 3DS and DS games for such a low entry price. This was an amazing deal at the expense of a feature that made me sick, so it was absolutely worth it in my eyes. However, there is also that form factor we need to talk about. This thing was designed to be a tank, so that it could withstand 6-year-olds and their natural urge to destroy everything in sight. Here's mine from when I was little, and God, you can tell. This thing is sticky, and when I tried to clean it, a part of the circle pad came off. Cool. The first thing you'll notice about this is the lack of the iconic clamshell design the DS was known for. Instead, this thing is just one big wedge. Some find this super comfortable, while others really don't. Personally, I think it's just fine. The 3DS line in general has just never been that comfortable to me, but the large wedge design makes it kinda comfy. My only real complaint is the shoulder buttons. They're kind of in a weird spot to reach, but it isn't that big of a deal. Apart from that, this is a pretty fun console to hold and use. This must have done well because later on they released the new 2DS XL, a budget budget version of the new 3DS XL. Apart from this having bigger screens and returning to the clamshell format, most of what I said before applies to this console as well. The wedge format being gone does make this less novel, but an XL variant of the wedge wouldn't have really worked. This is great in my current main 3DS, but I will admit the console as a whole does feel a bit cheap. It is hard to describe, but the whole thing just feels hollow and the hinge positions can be annoying. This was definitely not Nintendo's first rodeo with budget consoles though. This goes all the way back with consoles like the NES and SNES. Both of these had cost-effective variants, including the neat-looking top-loader NES. This was a budget, cheaper variant of the NES that takes cartridges through the top instead of the front. It even had a cool redesigned controller, which looks way more comfortable than the actual NES controllers. This was apparently a more sturdy and reliable version of the NES, but here in the States it only had RF out for video instead of the much better AV out that the original had. There were both unofficial and official ways to change this, but that can be difficult to find or mod in yourself, so it is up to you if you want this one or not. Lots of older consoles had budget versions too that I will quickly mention, like the Genesis, Intellivision, and Atari 2600. A more recent example of this that you might remember is with the Wii Family Edition. This was a cheaper version of the Wii that lacked the ability to play GameCube games and use any accessories that plugged into the GameCube controller ports, which are completely absent here. This wasn't the Wii's only cost-effective model though, because here we have the Wii Mini. This thing's design is adorable, with a flap on the top that you open and insert discs. This model unfortunately lacked even more features, lacking the ability to connect to the internet entirely. This is especially interesting because it came bundled with Mario Kart Wii, you know, the console's de facto online game. I love the way this looks so much that I may just make a video entirely about it at some point, but the emissions are just really damning and make this the worst Wii. Both of these Wiis are interesting novelties, but you are better off buying the original model nowadays, even if they're so cute and they have another flippy flappy. So we've been talking about old shit a lot, but what about nowadays? What do modern budget redesigns look like? Well, there's last gen's PS4 Slim, which as the name suggests is just a slimmer PS4. It has some other minor tweaks, but it is almost identical to the original PS4 and honestly has a worse design in my opinion. There's also the Xbox One S, not to be confused with the Xbox One X or Xbox Series S. They need to hire someone better to name these, holy shit. This was a cheaper Xbox One that I actually had back in the day, but eventually sold it because the Xbox One was a piece of shit and I hated it. This budget redesign actually had another budget redesign in the Xbox One S All Digital Edition. This is pretty self-explanatory. It doesn't use physical media or have a disk drive. And this is a great segue because this is what budget models usually are nowadays, digital-only systems. Here we have the PS5 Digital Edition and the Xbox Series S. The PS5's digital-only offer is honestly not compelling at all to me. You save a negligible amount of money buying a system with significantly less options. I'd rather pay the extra $50 and get a system that supports physical PS5 and PS4 games and is also a Blu-ray player. The PS5 also has a slim variant, but it costs the same and is more of just a replacement to the original model to put on store shelves. The Xbox Series S is much more appealing than the PS5 Digital Edition because this is significantly cheaper than the Series X. It is genuinely a good option to consider when you're thinking about buying one of these consoles. It may be less powerful and lack a disk drive, but that is because this thing, plain and simple, was designed to just be a Game Pass machine. Game Pass, Xbox's whole business surrounds it at this point. Pay a monthly fee and get access to an absolute truckload of games that you can download directly to your system. I have problems with Game Pass, but you can't deny that it is a very enticing service. And the Series S was designed to take advantage of this perfectly. It's a good way to experience Game Pass if that's what you're looking for at a much cheaper price. The only other budget variation on store nowadays is the Switch Lite, a Nintendo Switch that can't switch. This is like the 2DS where it takes away the console's main gimmick in return for a lower price. Depending on who you ask, this is either a good deal or a terrible one. The 30 on 3DS was honestly barely used by most people, so losing it isn't that bad. The ability to dock your Switch and play on the other hand though, that is pretty important to a significant chunk of the player base. I don't have a Switch Lite, but it appears to have a more sturdy and comfortable feel to it. It looks more personal and cute. I'd love to get one someday just to try it out. For the right crowd, this is a great system, but for the rest of us, it isn't a necessary purchase. Most people just go with the original Switch or the OLED model, which was released later. However, despite its drawbacks, this is still a good way to experience one of Nintendo's greatest libraries in history. And with that, we have caught up to the modern day. There are still so many budget console redesigns out there, and I didn't even touch on consoles like the Ouya or the Zibo that were designed specifically for gaming on a budget. These consoles may seem weird to some, missing all sorts of features, but they are very important to the industry and a part of why gaming is so big today, because more people can jump on at lower prices and get into video games. So thank you, budget consoles, for giving us all great experiences for great prices. That is, unless you're a dumbass like me.